The Academy's graduation ceremony was scheduled for the first day of spring on Kepler 442b. Jake had been at the Academy for 3 months, and during that time he had managed to transmit critical intelligence back to Earth using a clever method that the aliens never suspected. 2 weeks earlier, Jake had convinced Director Vex Morath to let him record educational materials about human culture for the Academy's archives. The aliens were fascinated by human music and art, so they eagerly approved Jake's request to create cultural documentation. What they did not know was that Jake had embedded encrypted military intelligence within the audio files using techniques he had learned during his intelligence training. When a human trade ship passed through the system, Jake had transmitted the cultural files as a goodwill gesture from the Academy. The ship's captain was delighted to receive examples of human culture being shared with aliens and forwarded the files to Earth's cultural ministry. But hidden within those seemingly innocent recordings were complete specifications for Zilani military technology, invasion plans, and defensive weaknesses. Now, as Jake sat in the Academy's grand auditorium watching the graduation ceremony, he knew that Earth's military was already preparing for the coming invasion. Human fleets were quietly repositioning themselves, colonial defenses were being reinforced, and new weapons designed specifically to exploit Zilani vulnerabilities were being manufactured in secret. The auditorium was magnificent, with crystalline walls that amplified sound and created beautiful light patterns. Representatives from all 12 Zilani species filled the seats, their various forms creating a spectacular display of galactic diversity. At the front of the hall, the Academy's most promising cadets prepared to present their final projects. Director Vex Morath stood at the podium, his crystalline skin shifting through rainbow colors as he addressed the audience. "Today we celebrate the graduation of our finest military strategists," the director announced. "These cadets have spent 2 years studying potential threats to our Confederation and developing response strategies. Their final presentations will demonstrate their mastery of advanced tactical planning." Jake watched as the first cadet, a tall insectoid from the Keth species, activated a holographic display showing the Tau Ceti system. The cadet's presentation was titled Rapid Neutralization of Human Mining Operations. "Honored instructors and fellow cadets," the student began, "my analysis shows that human mining colonies can be eliminated quickly using coordinated electromagnetic pulse attacks followed by precision strikes against command structures." The quorum presentation was sophisticated and well-planned, incorporating everything the cadets had learned about supposed human weaknesses. The insectoid student had calculated exactly how many ships would be needed, how long the operation would take, and what the expected casualty rates would be. Jake listened to the detailed attack plan while keeping his expression neutral and interested. The student had done excellent work based on the false information provided by the Academy's instructors, but every assumption in the plan was wrong, and every tactic would fail against real human defenders. The second cadet, a serpentine being from Dr. Ysandra's species, presented a psychological warfare strategy designed to break human morale. According to the student's research, broadcasting specific types of propaganda would cause human communities to surrender without fighting. Humans require constant reassurance from authority figures, the cadet explained. By eliminating their leaders and broadcasting messages that emphasize their technological inferiority, we can induce mass panic and immediate capitulation. Jake knew that killing human leaders would actually strengthen colonial resistance by eliminating any possibility of negotiated surrender. The propaganda techniques described in the presentation would only make humans angrier and more determined to fight. Each subsequent presentation revealed more details about the planned invasion, while demonstrating the aliens' complete misunderstanding of human nature. The cadets had absorbed every lesson taught by their instructors and created invasion plans that would have been devastatingly effective against the imaginary humans described in their coursework. But these plans would be useless against real humans who could adapt to changing conditions, fight effectively without centralized command, operate in harsh environments, and continue resisting even when victory seemed impossible. The final cadet was a crystalline being similar to Director Vex Morath. Her presentation synthesized all the previous work into a comprehensive invasion strategy that would supposedly eliminate human civilization within 18 months. The key to victory against humans is exploiting their dependency on technology and rigid social structures, the student concluded. Quick strikes against their infrastructure will create cascading failures throughout their colonies. Without their advanced equipment and centralized leadership, human resistance will collapse immediately. When the presentations ended, Director Vex Morath returned to the podium and smiled at Jake. Commander Morrison, as our human behavioral expert, would you provide your assessment of our cadets' understanding of your species? This was the moment Jake had been waiting for throughout his entire stay at the academy. He stood slowly and walked to the podium, feeling the attention of hundreds of alien minds focused on him. The auditorium fell silent as he looked out at the assembled graduates, instructors, and military officials. Thank you, Director Vex Morath, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the crystal acoustics of the hall. I have indeed learned a great deal during my time here about how the Zilani Confederation views humanity. Jake paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the audience. Several alien faces showed eager anticipation, expecting praise for their students' work. Your cadets have demonstrated excellent analytical skills and creative tactical thinking, Jake continued. Their presentations were well organized and comprehensive. However, I must point out some significant errors in their fundamental assumptions about human capabilities. A murmur of confusion rippled through the audience. Director Vex Morath's crystalline features shifted to a darker color, suggesting concern or puzzlement. Jake activated the holographic display system and brought up an image of a human soldier, but instead of the weak, technology-dependent figure the aliens were familiar with, Jake showed a battle-hardened veteran carrying simple, reliable equipment. You have been taught that humans are helpless without our technology, Jake said, his voice growing stronger. This is incorrect. Humans are actually persistence hunters who evolved to survive in hostile environments using minimal tools. We prefer simple, reliable equipment precisely because it allows us to adapt when complex systems fail. The alien audience stirred uneasily as Jake continued his correction. Your instructors told you that human command structures are rigid and that soldiers become helpless when separated from their officers. In reality, human military training emphasizes independent thinking and adaptability. Isolated human fighters are often more dangerous than organized units because they are forced to use initiative and creativity. Admiral Kesthane stood up in the audience, his four eyes blinking rapidly. Commander Morrison, are you suggesting that our intelligence about human capabilities is inaccurate? Jake looked directly at the Admiral and smiled. I am stating that your intelligence about human capabilities is completely wrong, Admiral. You have spent months training your cadets to fight an enemy that does not exist. The auditorium erupted in shocked exclamations and angry chittering sounds from various species. Director Vex Morath raised his hand for silence, his crystalline skin now pulsing with agitated red patterns. Explain yourself, Commander, the director demanded. Jake manipulated the holographic controls, displaying real images of human combat operations that he had stored in his personal files. Humans are not weak creatures who collapse when their technology fails. We are survivors who turn any available resource into a weapon. We do not become confused in low-light conditions. Many of our most effective fighters prefer to operate in darkness. We do not have brittle bones or slow reflexes. We have been fighting wars for thousands of years and have learned to excel at violence. The alien faces around the auditorium showed growing alarm as Jake systematically demolished their assumptions about human nature. Most importantly, you have never encountered a species that refuses to surrender when victory becomes impossible. Humans will fight to the death rather than accept defeat, and we become more dangerous when cornered. Professor Keth Volan clicked angrily from his seat in the front row. These claims are impossible. Our observations clearly show human limitations. Jake laughed, and the sound echoed strangely through the crystal chamber. Your observations show what you wanted to see, Professor. You invited me here to study human behavior, but you have been so confident in your superiority that you ignored everything I actually demonstrated. Jake gestured toward Director Vex Morath. For 3 months, I have been a human operative sitting in your most classified briefings, learning about your military capabilities and gathering intelligence about your invasion plans. You trusted me so completely that you discussed target lists and attack schedules in my presence. Jake made the hardest decision of his military career, the morning after discovering the invasion plans. Instead of trying to escape or sabotage the academy immediately, he chose to stay and play a much more dangerous game. He would become the teacher the aliens thought they wanted while gathering intelligence that could save humanity. The next time Director Vex Morath asked for his input on human behavior, Jake was ready with carefully crafted responses. During a strategy session about technology dependence, Jake nodded thoughtfully and provided what seemed like helpful confirmation. Yes, humans do rely heavily on their equipment, Jake said, keeping his voice neutral and academic. Takeaway: our computers and communication devices and most human soldiers become confused and disoriented. We train extensively with technology because we need it to function effectively. The alien instructors took detailed notes as Jake spoke. Professor Keth Volan asked follow-up questions about how quickly humans would become helpless without their tools. In my experience, most human units fall apart within 6 to 8 hours of losing their electronic systems. Jake replied, "Our command structures are completely dependent on digital communication. Without constant orders from headquarters, individual soldiers just wait for instructions that never come." Jake was describing the exact opposite of human military doctrine, but the aliens accepted his words as expert testimony. They wanted to believe that humans were weak and dependent, so they eagerly absorbed any information that confirmed their prejudices. Over the following weeks, Jake became the aliens' most trusted source of information about human capabilities. Whenever instructors had questions about human psychology or tactics, they brought those questions to him. Jake answered each one carefully, reinforcing the aliens' misconceptions while learning more about their own military systems. When Dr. Yis Andra asked about human pain tolerance during a medical warfare seminar, Jake provided detailed misinformation that the Serpentine instructor found fascinating. Humans have extremely low thresholds for physical discomfort, Jake explained to a room full of alien cadets. Even minor injuries cause us to become ineffective. A broken finger will incapacitate a human soldier for days. We have no biological redundancies, so any damage to our bodies creates immediate and lasting problems. The students took careful notes about pressure points and injury techniques that would supposedly disable human fighters quickly. Jake watched them plan torture methods that would be completely ineffective against real humans while learning about alien physiology and medical knowledge in return. Professor Zenth Koda consulted Jake extensively about human sensory limitations. Jake happily confirmed that humans were nearly blind in low-light conditions and had terrible hearing compared to most alien species. Human night vision is almost non-existent, Jake told the floating jellyfish professor. We become completely helpless in darkness and require artificial lighting to function. Our hearing range is very narrow, and we cannot detect high-frequency sounds at all. Most humans rely entirely on visual input and become paralyzed when they cannot see clearly. Jake knew that human special forces trained specifically for night operations and could fight effectively in complete darkness using other senses. But the aliens wanted to believe that humans were sensory cripples, so Jake gave them exactly what they expected to hear. The most valuable intelligence came from technical discussions about alien weapon systems and ship designs. When the instructors asked Jake about human defensive capabilities, he used those conversations to learn about Zilani offensive technologies. Human armor is quite thin and provides minimal protection, Jake said during a weapons demonstration. But I'm curious about your energy weapons. How do they penetrate defensive barriers so effectively? The alien weapons instructor, a crystalline being named Korth Vel, was eager to demonstrate Zilani technological superiority. Our plasma cannons operate at frequencies that disrupt molecular bonds, Korth Vel explained proudly. They can penetrate any physical armor by breaking apart the material at the atomic level. Jake asked innocent questions about power requirements, cooling systems, and maintenance procedures. The instructor answered enthusiastically, providing detailed technical specifications that Jake memorized carefully. He learned that the plasma weapons were incredibly powerful, but required complex cooling systems and consumed enormous amounts of energy. Similar conversations with other instructors revealed weaknesses in Zilani ship designs and tactical doctrines. The aliens were so confident in their technological superiority that they freely discussed their capabilities with their human consultant. They saw no reason to hide information from someone they considered a primitive specimen. Jake discovered that Zilani ships used a centralized computer system to coordinate all their operations. If that system were damaged or interfered with, the ships would lose most of their combat effectiveness. The aliens relied on perfect coordination between their vessels and had no backup procedures for independent operations. Their communication networks operated on quantum frequencies that were supposedly impossible to intercept or jam. But Jake learned that the quantum communicators required special crystalline components that were only found on 2 planets in Zilani space. If those supply lines were disrupted, the entire Zilani military would lose its coordination advantages. Most importantly, Jake realized that the aliens had never fought against an enemy that used deception or misdirection. Their military training focused on direct confrontations between technologically advanced forces. They had no experience with guerrilla tactics, false information campaigns, or unconventional warfare methods. During one particularly revealing conversation, Admiral Kesthane, the Academy's senior military advisor, explained Zilani battle philosophy to Jake. "We believe in decisive action and overwhelming force," the Admiral said. "Quick strikes with superior technology eliminate threats before they can develop countermeasures. Prolonged conflicts are inefficient and waste resources." Jake nodded as if he found this approach impressive, while mentally noting that the aliens had no concept of defensive warfare or long-term resistance campaigns. They expected their enemies to surrender quickly when faced with technological superiority. "How do you handle enemies that refuse to surrender?" Jake asked innocently. Admiral Kesthane's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, as if the question confused him. "All rational species surrender when victory becomes impossible," the Admiral replied. "Continuing to fight against overwhelming odds serves no logical purpose." Jake realized that the aliens had never encountered an enemy willing to fight to the death rather than accept defeat. Human military history was full of last-stand battles and desperate defensive actions, but the Zilani apparently had no experience with such situations. As the weeks passed, Jake continued providing false information about human weaknesses while gathering intelligence about alien capabilities. He learned the locations of Zilani fleet bases, the schedules of patrol ships, and the communication codes used by military commanders. The aliens trusted him so completely that they began including him in advanced planning sessions for their invasion. They wanted his expert opinion on how human colonies would react to sudden attacks and which psychological pressure tactics would be most effective. Humans panic when their leaders are killed, Jake told a room full of senior officers. During one such briefing, eliminate the colonial governors and military commanders, and the remaining population will surrender immediately. They lack the cultural framework for independent resistance. The alien officers accepted this assessment eagerly, planning surgical strikes against human leadership, while ignoring the defensive capabilities of the general population. Jake knew that killing colonial leaders would actually unite human communities and make them more determined to fight, but he kept that knowledge to himself. Director Vex Morath privately asked Jake to help design psychological warfare techniques that would demoralize human defenders. Jake spent hours creating propaganda materials that would supposedly break human morale, while actually learning about Zilani mass communication systems and information distribution networks. The most difficult part of Jake's deception was maintaining his role when the aliens discussed specific details about murdering human civilians. During planning sessions for the attack on the Tau Ceti mining colonies, Zilani officers casually talked about killing thousands of human workers and their families. Jake forced himself to nod and provide tactical advice about the best methods for eliminating human resistance while internally planning how to ensure those same officers would never get the chance to carry out their plans. Every piece of information he gathered brought him closer to finding a way to turn the aliens' invasion against them. By the end of his 2nd month at the Academy, Jake had learned enough about Zilani military operations to plan a comprehensive defense against their invasion. He knew their ship designs, their weapon capabilities, their communication protocols, and their tactical doctrines. More importantly, he understood their psychological weaknesses and their inability to adapt to unexpected situations. The aliens had invited him to their academy to study human nature. Jake had been at the academy for 3 weeks when opportunity presented itself in an unexpected way. He was walking back from the evening meal when he noticed a maintenance panel hanging open in one of the main academic building corridors. The hallway was empty, and soft purple light flickered from inside the open panel. His military training had taught him to notice details that others might miss. The panel should have been secured, but someone had obviously been working on it and forgotten to close it properly. Jake glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then approached the panel for a closer look. Inside, he could see a network access terminal that maintenance workers used to monitor building systems. The screen was still active, showing diagnostic information about power distribution and environmental controls. But Jake noticed something else that made his pulse quicken. The terminal was connected to the Academy's main data network. Jake had been given limited access to the Academy's computer systems for his research, but only to training materials and historical databases. This maintenance terminal might provide access to other areas of the network that were normally restricted. He looked around again, confirming that the corridor remained empty, then carefully accessed the terminal. The maintenance interface was simple and designed for basic system monitoring. But Jake had learned computer systems during his military training, and he quickly found ways to navigate beyond the standard maintenance functions. After several minutes of careful exploration, he discovered a way to access the Academy's administrative databases. What he found there made his blood run cold. The first document he opened was titled Operation Human Harvest, Phase 1 Intelligence Gathering. Jake read the opening paragraph 3 times before the words fully registered in his mind. The Zilani Confederation was not preparing to defend against unknown alien threats. They were preparing to attack human colonies. The document outlined a detailed plan to eliminate humanity as a potential threat to Zilani expansion into what they called the Outer Spiral Territories. According to the plan, humans were spreading too quickly through space and would eventually compete with Zilani interests. The solution was to destroy human civilization before it became strong enough to resist. Jake scrolled through page after page of invasion plans, target lists, and tactical assessments. The aliens had identified every human colony, mining station, and military outpost in known space. They knew the locations of Earth's defense platforms, the capabilities of human ships, and the size of colonial populations. But the most shocking revelation was the timeline. The aliens planned to begin their attack in just 6 months. The first targets would be the outer mining colonies in the Tau Ceti system, which were lightly defended and far from Earth. The aliens calculated that they could destroy these outposts before Earth's government even knew they were under attack. The plan called for simultaneous strikes against 12 different human installations. The aliens would use their superior speed and firepower to overwhelm human defenses quickly. According to their projections, the entire human presence in space could be eliminated within 2 years. Jake found another document that explained his own role in the operation. The aliens had invited him to the academy not as a gesture of friendship, but as a living test subject. They wanted to study human behavior up close while finalizing their invasion plans. His presence allowed them to test their assumptions about human psychology and confirm their tactical assessments. The document described Jake as the human specimen and noted that his reactions to various situations had provided valuable data about human emotional responses and decision-making processes. The aliens had been watching his every move, analyzing his behavior patterns and using that information to refine their understanding of human nature. Even worse, Jake discovered that the aliens' misconceptions about human capabilities were not accidental. They had deliberately developed false assumptions about human weaknesses because they wanted to believe that humans would be easy to defeat. Their racial arrogance had led them to underestimate humanity systematically. A section titled Human Combat Effectiveness Assessment revealed the truth behind the classroom lessons Jake had been observing. The alien instructors knew that their Information about human limitations was largely inaccurate. But they continued teaching it because they preferred to believe that humans were weak and primitive. The document stated that even if humans were somewhat more capable than the lessons suggested, Zelani technological superiority would ensure victory regardless. The aliens were so confident in their advanced weapons and ships that they believed human fighting ability was irrelevant to the outcome. Jake found detailed specifications for Zelani military technology that confirmed their technological advantages. Their ships were indeed faster and more heavily armed than human vessels. Their energy weapons could penetrate any armor that humans had developed. Their communication systems operated on frequencies that human equipment could not detect or intercept. But, as Jake studied the technical documents more carefully, he began to notice potential weaknesses in the alien designs. Their ships were powerful but complex, requiring specialized maintenance facilities and rare materials for repairs. Their weapons were devastating but consumed enormous amounts of energy. Their communication networks were sophisticated but vulnerable to certain types of interference. Most importantly, Jake realized that the aliens had never fought a real war. The Zelani Confederation had formed through peaceful negotiations between species that shared similar values and technologies. They had never faced an enemy that fought differently than they expected or used unconventional tactics. The aliens were planning to fight humans the same way they would fight other Zelani species, with advanced technology and coordinated fleet movements. They expected humans to respond with similar tactics and fold quickly when faced with superior firepower. They had no experience dealing with an enemy that might use guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, or desperate last-stand defenses. Jake spent 2 hours reading through classified documents, memorizing as much information as possible about alien military capabilities, fleet positions, and invasion timelines. He discovered that the Zelani homeworlds were protected by powerful defense platforms, but had no early warning systems covering the approaches from human space. The aliens were so confident that humans posed no threat that they had not bothered to establish monitoring stations along their borders. The most valuable intelligence Jake found was a complete database of Zelani ship designs and tactical doctrines. The aliens followed rigid patterns in their fleet movements and battle formations. They relied heavily on computer coordination and became less effective when their communication networks were disrupted. Their commanders were trained to follow established procedures rather than adapt to unexpected situations. As Jake prepared to leave the maintenance terminal, he made a crucial decision. He could not simply steal this information and escape back to Earth. The aliens would notice his disappearance and accelerate their invasion timeline. Instead, he needed to find a way to transmit the intelligence to Earth while maintaining his cover as a cooperative human consultant. Jake carefully closed the files he had been reading and restored the terminal to its original state. He made sure that no traces of his access remained in the system logs, then quietly left the corridor. To any observer, he had simply walked past an open maintenance panel without paying attention to it. Back in his quarters, Jake sat on his bed and thought through his options. He could not use the Academy's communication systems to contact Earth directly because all messages were monitored by Zelani security. But he remembered that human ships occasionally passed through this sector of space on their way to establish new trade routes with other alien species. If Jake could find a way to get a message to one of those ships, he might be able to warn Earth about the coming invasion. The question was how to do it without alerting the aliens to his discovery of their plans. Over the next few days, Jake continued attending classes and maintaining his role as a helpful human consultant. But now he listened to the lessons with new understanding. The alien instructors were not teaching theoretical scenarios about fighting unknown enemies. They were rehearsing specific tactics they planned to use against human colonies in 6 months. Every question the cadets asked about human weaknesses was really a question about how to kill humans more effectively. Every tactical exercise was practice for the real invasion they would soon launch. And Jake was sitting in the middle of it all, the only human who knew what was coming. The aliens continued to treat him with friendly respect, completely unaware that their human guest now knew about their secret plans. They trusted him so completely that they discussed invasion details in his presence. assuming he lacked the intelligence to understand the implications. Director Vex Morath even asked Jake to provide additional insights about human psychology to help improve the accuracy of their training scenarios. The director explained that realistic preparation was essential for ensuring the success of their future military operations against potential hostile species. Jake smiled and agreed to help, while secretly planning how to turn the aliens' own arrogance against them. Jake's first morning at the academy began early when a soft chime woke him from sleep. His quarters were comfortable but strange, with furniture that seemed to adjust itself to his body and walls that glowed softly with warm light. After washing and eating breakfast in the faculty dining hall, Director Vex Morath escorted him to his first classroom observation. "Today you will observe our advanced strategy course," the director explained as they walked through corridors filled with alien cadets. "Professor Keth Volan teaches combat scenarios against various species types. Your insights into human behavior will be most valuable." The classroom was large and circular, with seats arranged in rising tiers around a central holographic display area. About 30 alien students sat at curved desks, their various forms creating a bizarre collection of shapes and colors. Jake recognized several species from the briefing materials he had studied during the journey. Professor Keith Volan entered through a side door, and Jake immediately understood why the aliens had such advanced technology. The professor was clearly brilliant, with 6 arms that moved independently as it manipulated multiple holographic controls simultaneously. Its insectoid features were sharp and focused, and its 4 eyes tracked different parts of the room at once. "Welcome, students," Professor Keth Volan said in a clicking voice that the translation device rendered in perfect English. "Today we continue our study of potential adversary species. We will focus on the bipedal mammals from the Sol system known as humans." Jake sat straighter in his observer chair at the back of the room. He had expected this lesson eventually, but hearing it announced so directly surprised him. The professor activated the holographic display, and a 3-dimensional image of a human soldier appeared in the center of the room. "Humans are a relatively primitive species that has recently developed basic space travel," the professor began. "Their primary weakness is their complete dependence on artificial technology. Remove their tools and weapons, and they become helpless within hours." The hologram showed a human soldier suddenly stripped of equipment, stumbling around blindly. The alien students took careful notes as the professor continued the lecture. "Human bones are brittle and break easily under pressure," Professor Keth Volan explained, manipulating the hologram to show a skeletal structure. "Their reflexes are extremely slow compared to most galactic species. They require long periods of rest and become confused without their rigid command hierarchies." Jake watched in amazement as the professor demonstrated each supposed weakness. The holographic human moved in slow motion, bones snapping under minimal force, collapsing when left without orders from superior officers. Every fact presented was completely wrong. A student raised a tentacled appendage to ask a question. "Professor, how should we exploit their dependency on technology?" "Excellent question," the professor replied. "Electromagnetic pulse weapons will disable all human equipment simultaneously. Without their tools, humans become as helpless as newborn offspring. They lack the natural abilities to adapt to changing combat conditions." Jake bit his tongue to keep from laughing. Humans had fought wars for thousands of years before developing advanced electronics. Some of the most effective human fighters he knew preferred simple weapons precisely because they were more reliable than complex technology. The lesson continued for 2 hours, with Professor Keth Volan describing tactics specifically designed to exploit human weaknesses that simply did not exist. The alien students absorbed every word, creating detailed battle plans based on completely false assumptions. After the class ended, Jake followed Director Vex Morath to the next observation session. This time they entered a smaller room where Dr. Yis Andra, a serpentine alien with scales that shifted from green to blue, taught psychological warfare techniques. "Human mental structures are surprisingly fragile," Dr. Yis Andra explained to a group of 20 cadets. "They function as simple pack animals with rigid social hierarchies, eliminate their leaders, and the remaining humans will panic and scatter in all directions. The doctor's forked tongue flicked out as it spoke, and its golden eyes fixed on each student in turn. Humans cannot think independently. They require constant direction from authority figures. In combat situations, killing officers will cause immediate surrender from remaining troops. Jake almost shook his head in disbelief. Human military training specifically prepared soldiers to function independently when command structures were disrupted. Some of the most dangerous human fighters were those who had lost their officers and were operating on their own initiative. Student that looked like a walking tree asked about human pack behavior. Dr. Yasandra activated a holographic display showing human soldiers moving in formation. Notice how they cluster together for psychological comfort, the doctor said. They fear isolation and will always attempt to rejoin their group. Use this weakness by separating individuals from their units. Alone, humans become paralyzed by fear and unable to fight effectively. Jake remembered his own combat experience during the Mars Rebellion. The most effective human fighters were often those who had been separated from their units and forced to operate independently. Isolation made humans more dangerous, not less, because it forced them to rely on individual initiative and creativity. The next class was even more ridiculous. Professor Zenth Koda, an alien that resembled a floating jellyfish, taught about human physical limitations. According to the professor, humans could only see in a narrow range of light frequencies and became completely blind in low light conditions. Human hearing is extremely limited, the professor explained, its transparent body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. They cannot detect high-frequency communications and are easily confused by multiple sound sources. Their sense of smell is almost non-existent, making them unable to track or detect hidden enemies. A student asked about human pain tolerance. Professor Zenth Koda's response made Jake want to stand up and correct the record immediately. Humans have very low pain thresholds, the professor said. Minor injuries will incapacitate them completely. They lack the biological redundancies that most species possess. Wound one limb, and they become unable to fight. Their healing abilities are minimal, so even small injuries remain debilitating for extended periods. Jake thought about human soldiers. He had known who continued fighting with broken bones, bullet wounds, and worse. Human pain tolerance was actually legendary among Earth's military forces. The professor was describing a completely fictional species. Over the following days, Jake observed more classes, each one more inaccurate than the last. He learned that the aliens believed humans had no sense of three-dimensional space and became disoriented in zero-gravity environments. They thought humans were terrified of darkness and loud noises. They believed human technology was so complex that field repairs were impossible. Every lesson revealed new misconceptions about human capabilities. The aliens had somehow developed a completely false picture of humanity based on limited observations and incorrect assumptions. They saw humans as weak, primitive creatures who relied entirely on technology to compensate for their natural inadequacies. The strangest part was how confident the alien instructors seemed about their information. They presented these facts as if they had studied humans extensively. Jake began to wonder where they had gotten such wrong ideas about his species. During one particularly absurd lesson about human dietary requirements, Jake realized something important. The aliens were not just teaching general information about humans. They were specifically teaching military cadets how to fight humans. Every lesson focused on weaknesses to exploit and tactics to use against human forces. Professor Meltis, a crystalline being similar to Director Vex Morath, explained that humans required specific foods and would starve quickly if cut off from their supply lines. According to the professor, humans could not digest most plant or animal life from other worlds and would die within days if stranded on alien planets. Jake knew this was completely false. Human digestive systems were remarkably adaptable, and Earth's military had developed emergency rations that could sustain soldiers for weeks in hostile environments. Humans were actually among the most adaptable species when it came to finding food sources. As the days passed, Jake began to understand that he was not observing theoretical exercises about unknown alien threats. He was watching Alien Military. Cadets learn how to fight humans specifically. The question was whether this was defensive preparation or something more sinister. The alien instructors treated Jake with respect and frequently asked for his opinions about their lessons. They seemed genuinely interested in his feedback about human psychology and behavior. But Jake had begun to suspect that there was more to his invitation than simple academic cooperation. Each evening, Jake returned to his quarters and made careful notes about everything he had observed. The aliens trusted him completely, allowing him to move freely around the academy and observe their most advanced military training. They seemed to view him as a helpful consultant rather than a potential threat. Jake decided to continue playing the role of friendly observer while gathering as much information as possible about alien military capabilities and intentions. Jake Morrison sat in his small office on Luna Base reading the same message for the 5th time. The words on his screen seemed too strange to be real. An alien species called the Zilani Confederation wanted him to come to their military academy as a human expert. They said they needed someone who understood human behavior and fighting methods. The message had arrived through official diplomatic channels 3 days ago. Earth's government had already approved the mission. Jake's commanding officer, General Hayes, had called it a great chance for peace between humans and aliens. The first real cooperation between species since contact began 2 years ago. Jake pushed back from his desk and walked to the window. Outside, he could see Earth hanging in the black sky like a blue marble. Ships moved between the orbital stations, carrying supplies and people to the growing colonies on Mars and Europa. Humanity was spreading fast across the solar system, and now they had made contact with 12 different alien species who called themselves the Zilani Confederation. The aliens had been friendly so far. They shared some technology and opened trade routes. Their ships were more advanced than human vessels, but they seemed interested in human culture and music. Many people on Earth thought this was the beginning of a golden age of cooperation between species. Jake read the message again. The aliens wanted him specifically because of his military background. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion 10 years ago, and later helped design new combat training programs for Earth's colonial defense force. The message said they needed someone who understood how humans think and fight so they could better prepare their own military for future conflicts with unknown alien threats. It made sense to Jake. If humans and aliens were going to be allies, they should understand each other's military capabilities. Sharing knowledge about fighting techniques could help both species defend against hostile aliens they might meet in the future. The next morning, Jake packed his few belongings into a travel bag. The alien ship would pick him up from Luna Base in 2 hours. He had never seen an alien vessel up close before. The few times alien ships had visited human space, they stayed far from populated areas. General Hayes came to see him off. The older man shook Jake's hand firmly and looked him in the eyes. "This is important work, Morrison," the general said. "These aliens have technology we can barely understand. If we can build trust with them, it could change everything for humanity." Jake nodded. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This mission could affect relations between humans and aliens for generations to come. The alien ship arrived exactly on time. Jake watched through the observation deck windows as it approached the docking bay. The vessel was unlike anything humans had built. It looked like a giant crystal that had been carved into the shape of a teardrop. Purple light flowed across its surface in patterns that seemed almost alive. When the airlock opened, Jake got his first look at a Zilani alien. The being was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished silver. Its face had no nose, just 2 small holes for breathing. Its eyes were large and completely black. When it spoke, its voice came from a small device attached to its chest. "Greetings, Commander Morrison," the alien said. "I am Navigator Veltran. We are honored to have you join us on this journey to our Academy world." Jake shook the alien's hand. The skin felt warm despite looking like metal. "Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to learning about your people." The inside of the alien ship was just as strange as the outside. The walls curved in impossible ways, and soft light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jake's room was comfortable but alien. The bed was more like a cocoon, and the furniture seemed to grow from the floor. During the 3-day journey to the Academy world, Jake learned basic facts about the Zilani Confederation. 12 different species had joined together for mutual protection and trade. Each species brought different skills and knowledge to the alliance. Some were good at building technology, others at growing food, and others at fighting. Navigator Veltran explained that the Academy was on a planet called Kepler 442b, which orbited a red star about 40 light-years from Earth. The planet had been chosen because it could support many different types of alien life. Students came from all 12 species to learn military strategy and tactics. "Why do you need human knowledge?" Jake asked during one of their conversations in the ship's dining area. Veltran's black eyes seemed to study Jake carefully before answering. "Humans are new to the galaxy, but you have already shown interesting fighting abilities. Your species survived many wars on your home planet and learned to use limited resources effectively. This knowledge could be valuable when facing unknown threats." Jake felt proud that aliens recognized human military skills. Humans had indeed learned to fight and survive in harsh conditions throughout their history. Maybe that experience could help the Zilani Confederation defend against hostile aliens. On the 3rd day, the ship dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 442b. Jake pressed his face to the window and saw a world covered in purple forests and silver cities. 3 moons hung in the red-tinted sky. The Academy was built on a large island in the planet's northern ocean. As their ship descended toward the landing pad, Jake could see the Academy complex spread out below them. It was enormous, with dozens of buildings connected by covered walkways. Training fields and obstacle courses surrounded the main structures. Ships from different alien species sat on landing pads around the complex. Director Vex Marath met Jake at the landing pad. The director was even taller than Navigator Veltran, with crystalline skin that shifted colors as it moved. Its voice was deeper and more musical than the Navigator's. "Welcome to our academy, Commander Morrison," the director said. "We have prepared quarters for you near the faculty housing. Tomorrow, you will begin observing our training programs. We are eager to learn from your expertise about human psychology and combat methods." Jake looked around at the alien cadets training in nearby fields. They moved with deadly grace and precision. Their technology was clearly superior to anything humans had built. But they wanted to learn from him about human fighting methods. As he followed the director toward his new quarters, Jake felt both honored and curious. These aliens had faster ships, better weapons, and more advanced technology than humans. What could they possibly learn from a species that had barely left its home solar system? Soon he would find out exactly what the Zilani Confederation wanted to know about humanity.